Hey, everybody. Happy to have you here. My name's Emery. I am a long distance hiker. Been hiking and backpacking for like 25 years. I also am the store manager of our Shepherd location of Whole Earth Provision Company in Houston, Texas. We're all here today to talk about water filtration and purification. We'll just dive right in. So a little bit of the nitty gritty just to start out. We'll be using three terms to describe the different ways to get clean water. Filtration refers to pushing water mechanically through a filter, and that's really going to take out things like bacteria and protozoa. We'll be using purification in reference to not only taking out bacteria and protozoa, but also viruses. Viruses are much smaller than bacteria, and so they're often a lot harder to pull out. The last term we'll use is sterilization. Sterilization kind of falls under the umbrella of purification. The main difference is that purification, you are sometimes inactivating or actually pulling viruses out of the water. When we're talking about sterilization, that's going to be where we're actually killing the bacteria and protozoa in the water, but we're not removing it from the water. So a little bit of a difference. So let's go ahead and start there. Sterilization is is the most common form of getting clean water. So you can sterilize water with ultraviolet light. You can sterilize water with heat by boiling it. You can also sterilize water with chemicals. So those three uses are pretty foolproof, and they're really good for getting clean water. Some downsides with sterilization are they're not going to affect the taste. They're not going to take out any grime or anything like that in the water. And they often can take a lot of time or energy in the case of boiling water. So there are some big drawbacks to sterilization. When we're looking at sterilization equipment you could get from us, we're talking about ultraviolet treatments or chemical treatments. So these are things that really have a factor of time and clarity. So when you are using chemicals, you really want to be aware of the temperature and time. So often you'll want to open up the package and actually read the detailed instructions, because a lot of times it can take up to 4 hours to completely sterilize chemically treated water. And if the water is colder, it can take even longer than that. So you really want to be aware of how to use any sort of chemical when you're using it in the water. Some other drawbacks of using chemicals is that they can affect the taste of the water. They do have systems that come with a sterilizer as well as a neutralizer, and that helps with the taste. But, sometimes people don't like that. Also, utilizing chemicals for an extended period of time can have some health drawbacks, specifically if you're using iodine. Some people will even use bleach. You can drink bleach in small amounts when you're trying to clean water, but if you do it for an extended period of time, that's not always doctor recommended. With ultraviolet treatment, it's actually shooting a light in the water. If you were to go to the CDC website and look at their emergency preparedness page, one of the ways they recommend to get to cleaning water is put water in a milk jug, put it outside in direct sunlight for 12 hours, and you've got clean water. Plastics sometimes leach into the water and change the taste of it. Well, sure, but ultimately you need clean water a lot more than that negative taste of the plastics are going to hurt you. And so that's a great treatment. They make portable ones that are ultraviolet pens that you can stick into the water, and they work really well. The downside is that if the water is really dirty or cloudy, you might not have success. So basically the rule of thumb is if it's cloudier than weak lemonade, the ultraviolet system is not going to work so well. Going from sterilization stuff, we have filtration. So you'll see lots of different types of filters. The most common technology is hollow fiber filtration. just basically in layman's terms, this is the same technology that you would see in a dialysis machine, just shrunk down. So they work really well. They are easy to use, pretty foolproof, and they are relatively, depending on the one that you're getting, they can be relatively inexpensive. These are going to work really, really great for the vast majority of backcountry trips you might take in North America, because here in the States, you're not really worried about viruses in backcountry water sources. So utilizing one of these works really well. And then finally, purification. So purification would be something like these ones here or this one right there. These are also using hollow fiber technology to filter the bacteria and protozoa out, but they also have some extra things on them, like this one has a coating in it that it basically creates a positive charge that bonds to negatively charged viruses to pull them out of the water. And then the Guardian filter is basically utilizing pressure and really advanced hollow fiber filters to physically push the water through the filter and thus remove viruses. So a good question to ask yourself is, which one do I want? Do I need to take viruses out of my water, or am I just worried about bacteria and protozoa? Bacteria and protozoa are things like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, the things that give you bad gastrointestinal problems. Those can be a nightmare out on the trail, and these all work really well at removing those. If you are concerned, if you're traveling internationally, viruses basically they come from feces, and so if you're traveling to places that don't have great sanitation, or there's a lot of human contact, or if you're in the backcountry at a heavily used site, sometimes national parks can be symptomatic of this. You might be more concerned with viruses, and then utilizing a purification system versus a filtration system will work out well for you. The other thing is that, if you live in Texas, maybe you were under a boil water notice for the past week or so. Instead of having to go buy a bunch of water, a filter could work really, really well. And if you were out of luck without having a gas stove and you didn't have electricity, it created some real hardships and real challenges for people to be able to get clean water. So if you were concerned about building a backcountry kit, or an emergency kit for emergency preparedness scenarios, oftentimes a Holocore filter is going to be a really great bet. For example, this current emergency situation that hit Texas was not because the water treatment plants were shutting down. It was because that the pipes were not able to maintain enough pressure to push to everybody's house. City pipes are generally under a positive pressure. They're made to leak. And so long as water is leaking out of those pipes, nothing is leaching into the water. But if the city can't maintain that positive pressure because everybody's dripping their pipes, or there's a lot of broken pipes, and so they can't pressurize the whole system, it allows the ability for things to leach in. And the reality is that these are clean water pipes. They are not traveling with feces, so viruses would probably not be a huge concern for you, and oftentimes this would work really, really well. If you're like me in Houston, Texas, and you live in the Bayou City, you might have let's just say the emergency preparedness scenario that you've got to get water from the bayou. Well, the bayou certainly does have feces in it. And in that case, I would really consider using a purification system to pull out all the nasty stuff as well as the viruses, or I could use a filtration system and modify it with chemicals or an ultraviolet treatment to really make sure I've got everything killed in there so I can have nice, clean, fresh drinking water. In regards to the different types of systems you want, there's a few different variables. So there's gravity-fed systems here. I've got a demonstration right there. There's microfilters that can screw on top of like water bottles and things like that. So we've got a Sawyer Mini right there. And then there's straight up pump filters. So things like the Guardian filter here. They all have different uses and different strengths. They can really make some better and some maybe less desirable. So if you are just trying to get clean water for yourself, clean drinking water, the Holocore microfilters are really a great way to go. These filters screw onto the bottles. They are pretty easy to clean, and they're kind of foolproof. And they're really, really great at filtering small amounts of water at a time. So, for example, using a smart water bottle with a Sawyer Mini filter is a really big favorite amongst like long distance hikers and whatnot. But you can see when I am trying to get water out of here, I am squeezing the bottle to shoot it into my mouth. If I had to filter large amounts of water with this, that can be kind of exhausting and maybe not the best for a group scenario. But if you're just filtering water for yourself, this works really, really well. If you wanted to filter water a little bit faster and maybe in higher volumes, you might consider a pump filter. So these ones can be as small as this little guy here that has the MSR trail shot that has the intake valve here and then the output here, and I just squeeze it like that to squeeze water out of it. Or you could use a more traditional pump like the Hiker Pro right there, or the Guardian Purifier filter over there. I've got a really, really old one set up to demo for you. So as you can see, I've got the intake in the water and then the output here attached to the bottle. And as I am getting water, I'm physically pumping and forcing the water through this filter into the bottle. As you can see, I've got two different tubes right here. I have to find a place to balance my water bottle as well as physically use brute force to force it through the filter. So this has a much higher flow rate and is better for filtering higher volumes of water, but it can be quite tiring. And so these works really well for like groups. These are really common with like Boy Scouts and stuff like that, because if a scout gets tired, just throw another kid at it and have them start pumping. Some of the other drawbacks of that are that if you are filtering through a really dirty stream or whatnot, you always kind of want to be careful to have the intake floating near the top of the water. Oftentimes they will have a floaty on them, but that can be a challenge. It's easier said than done. So finding a location with a pebble bottom or stuff like that can really, really help. These also have microfilters pre-filters on them. So a pre-filter is really going to help remove that initial sediment that would gunk up the rest of your filter. Really, really dirty water, you will have a noticeable difference in how hard it is to pump the water, as well as how fast your flow rate will be. When we're talking about flow rate, you can see it on a lot of the packaging for these. So the Guardian has really fast flow rate at 2.5 liters a minute. That's really, really fast and going to make for some easy pumping. That one that I was just using, that's about 15 years old, that probably has a flow rate of like a liter or maybe a half liter a minute. So if I was pumping 4 liters, basically a gallon of water, man, I would be tired at the end of it. So, pump filters are really, really useful for higher volumes of water. and maybe bigger groups, but they can be a little bit trickier to use and can be physically exhausting. One of the benefits of a pump filter versus one of these Holocore filters is that they do have interchangeable cartridges that allow you to basically increase the lifespan of this filter. So that one I just showed you, that's like 15 years old. So long as I can replace the cartridges for it, that filter keeps working. So it's a really great long-term investment because you can just switch out the cartridges. When it comes to end of use of your hollow fiber microfilters, you'll notice that the flow rate will slow down, which means it'll just be really hard to squeeze the water through it. But it also might be because the filter is physically clogged. So what you would often do is backflush to, in essence, clean the particulates out of the filter. So, for example, the Sawyer filters come with this nifty little syringe. So you would fill this up with clean water and push it in the direction opposite the flow arrow. So we're going to go from the clean side out, push that through, and then that's going to clean out your filter, and you should notice a very steep increase in your flow rate. If you don't see any change, then it might be end of life for that filter. The Catadine B-Free is a really, really neat system in that instead of having to push it through, you just shake the system, and that's going to clean off the filter and allow you to resume a faster flow rate. It's really neat technology, and this is a whole lot easier to use than having to carry around a syringe and physically pushing water back through the Sawyer. When it comes to gravity filters, it is really, really simple to backflush them. You would just take the clean water and hold it over the filter, and that's going to push clean water back through it. And oftentimes, if the water was really dirty, you would see a of dirt come back into your dirty water bag, which is very satisfying. With the Sawyer Mini and the Sawyer Squeeze, as well as the Catadine B-Free system, those ones, when the filter stops flowing at a reasonable rate, so you'll know it's kind of reaching the end of life. With any of these, when it's physically hard to pump the water through and the flow rate has dramatically decreased, well, it might be time to get a new filter. And in the case of these, you're simply replacing it. You're not, the system itself is enclosed. So once this is no longer working, you just buy a new one and use something else. When it comes to purification, we also have some really neat systems. So a lot of people have heard of the life straw. There's a lot of variations of that. This one here, you can see the gentleman on there. He is just sucking water straight out of the lake. We also have one that screws into your water bottle. So the really benefit of that is that, much like this one that screws onto the water bottle, it is going to be really, really easy to drink from, pretty foolproof to, get yourself sick, and is also going to remove viruses, which is super slick. These ones here are using that a positive charge. Basically, when the filter itself gets wet, it has a ceram coating on it, and the positive charge will bond with the negatively charged viruses, which is really, really cool. When you get to this guy here, you'll notice that the filter is enclosed in this hard polycarbonate shell. When you are pumping it, you are physically forcing the water through there, and that is basically bonding with it with any bacteria, protozoa, viruses, and pulling those out of the water. So they work really slick. Then finally, you might consider a gravity filter system. Gravity filters are really great for really big groups. They're also great for emergency preparedness scenarios because this is going to allow you to filter a gallon of water with really effortless work. I have two set up. One is a store-bought one, so this one is by MSR. Platypus also makes one. Katadyn makes one. There's a bunch of different companies that make these ones. This one is sort of a homegrown one that I've made up using a Sawyer squeeze filter. The difference between one you would buy ready to go or one you might make yourself, so there's going to be a huge difference in the flow rate. So this one is not going to flow as fast, but it'll be just as easy. So we can go ahead and click these both open. And they're just going to start filling up these bottles with water. And we'll notice that this one, in just a couple minutes, is going to have the other water bottle filled, whereas this one will still be working. Finally, the UV sterilization. UV is kind of cool, but there's a couple tips and tricks. One mistake that a lot of people make when they're using a UV system is that they'll scoop water out of a stream that's contaminated and then treat it and then drink it. Well, the problem is that all that contaminated water is now on the lip of your water bottle. So having something that you can scoop water and pour it into your water bottle, or you can buy things that cover up the threads of the water bottle while you fill them up, work really, really slick. And then you would just take this, click the button, wait for it to start flashing green, and you can see it lights up. And I can just set that there. And in a couple minutes, I'm going to have clean water, so long as the water itself is not, super, super cloudy. Let's see. Another thing that is kind of, that often comes up is people will have these water filter cartridges, like for a Brita water filter or a pure water filter that you would put on your faucet at home. You really want to be careful when you are buying those filters because they are generally made for taste and not so much taking out any bacteria, protozoa, or viruses. So when you're looking at these, you can see on this one right here, they're need to meet EPA standards. This one meets military standards, and it's going to call out removes 99.9% of viruses, 99.9% of protozoa, and 99.9999 of bacteria. So if they're not calling out those specific statistics, that's really not going to take anything out. It's really just a cosmetic, makes your water better tasting. Finally, when we're talking about chemicals, another way that people often mess up if they're using a chemical treatment is the same thing with the UV treatment. So they'll scoop water out of the stream, but then the lip of the water bottle is infected. So what you would do is you would put the chemical in the water bottle, loosely screw the cap on, and then flip it upside down and burp it until you had a little bit of water come out and get in those threads, and then screw it back in, and then wait. It's important to do this after you have let the whatever chemicals treatment you're using dissolve, so it's actually in there, and then wait the amount of time and drink your water. And if it tastes weird, put some lemonade in it. It'll taste great. Another item of note would be that with these filters here, there is a concern of freezing. If it is freezing cold, you want to try to make sure that there is no water in there and potentially even sleep with one of these in your sleeping bag. If not, just like our pipes during this past freeze in Texas, the water will freeze, expand, and break the filter. But if you're using a hollow filter on the Guardian purifier, well, that one, freezing doesn't hurt it. And so if it freezes, you just need to let it thaw out, and that filter is good to go. So it's a little bit more expensive, but it really does have some ease of use and some foolproof mechanisms to make sure that water is going to keep filtering no matter what. To summarize, Filtration, bacteria, protozoa, North American backcountry, this is going to work for most of your purposes. Sterilization, chemicals, and ultraviolet light, also boiling water, those are going to work great and really be foolproof in sort of emergency preparedness scenarios. And then purification, those are going to be your catch-all. So that is great for emergency preparedness, international travel, heavily soiled backcountry areas, stuff like that. Those ones are going to really just do everything. And if you don't feel confident in your judgment of water quality and what's going on with the water system, using a purifier versus a filtration system is really going to be the way to go. So that's about my time. Let me know if you have any questions afterwards. And yeah, I've been Emery. Thanks for coming to Water Filtration and Purification.